So here we are at the beginning of August in 2024. Before we get into the month of August, though, it's time to reflect on the month of July. So let's talk about the books that I read during July. Let's talk about some of the videos that BelTube put out during the month. And most importantly, let's roll the intro. Hey everybody, welcome back to BelTube. I am Brian Bell. If you're here for the first time, welcome to the nonsense. If you've been here a few times, you already know what you're in store for. Today we're going to go through July, and I read 7 books in the month of July. The first one being, here we go, book 6 in the Sun Eater. This is Disquiet Gods by Christopher Ruocchio. Okay, you guys, we're finally back on the Sun Eater train. As you may know, if you've watched the channel at all, I was a giant fan of books 1, 2, and 3 in Sun Eater. Books 4 and 5 kind of fell off for me, not so much in the writing themselves, but more so in just the content. I found the books to kind of be a bummer, and I understand why the main character, Hadrian, needed to go through the events that he did in books 4 and books 5 to get him to book 6. So it makes sense in retrospect, but at the time, it just kind of felt like I was calling it The Many Miseries of Marlowe, because that's what it felt like. So now I am happy to report back that Disquiet Gods is back into form, sort of about like what Demon in White was for me, which is my favorite book of the series. I loved this book. It was tremendous. It gives me so much faith looking forward to book 7, the final book in the Sun Eater. For those of you who have asked, I've not read the short stories. I've not read the novellas in this world. I probably will at some point, but to be honest with you, the TBR, as I'm sure you can imagine, is quite mountainous. Is that a word? Someone's going to tell me in the comments if mountainous is a word. I think it is. I think I said commonnance, which is definitely not a word. Let's move on to the second book. And the second book that I read during the month of July is by Angus Donald. This is called Outlaw, and it was sent to me by one of our patrons, Heidi. Now, Outlaw is a fictional tale of Robin Hood. Now, you want to talk about the OG Motley Crew? They're all here. We get Robin Hood. We get Friar Tuck, although I think he's called Brother Tuck in the book. We have Little John. We've got everybody in this book. Will Scarlet. They're all there. And it was exactly what the doctor ordered for me for the month of July. You're going to find that to be a pretty common theme here in this video because August and May, and really even going as far back as March, I was reading some very dense material, and I looked at July as kind of a way of saying, all right, let's pick some books that are a little bit more lighthearted and just have a fun reading month. That's exactly what I got with Outlaw. I would absolutely recommend this for historical fiction. I would recommend it for somebody who wants a pretty quick read. I mean, it's not big. It's like 300 pages at the most, and it flies by pretty quick. I really did like that. Thank you again, Heidi, for sending it. It was a really welcome second book of the month. Let's talk about our third book. Now, this is something that was sent to me by the author herself, Palmer Pickering. This is Dark Town, and it is billed as a lit RPG adventure. It sort of is a lit RPG adventure. I'll tell you a little bit about that here, but this book was exactly what I was looking for as well. It's not full-on lit RPG where there's a lot of game mechanics and progression and certain kind of titles that characters get from time to time. If none of that made any sense to you, I'm going to put a card right here called The Top 10 Reasons Why Fantasy Readers Should Read Lit RPG. And some of those things that I just talked about will be in that video. You'll want to take a look at it. But despite all of that, Dark Town is a really fun book. Somehow the author here has managed to put cozy into kind of like a game-lit setting, which is very difficult to do because in most lit RPG and in most game lit, we are dealing with pretty high stakes. In this book, we're dealing with pretty low stakes. We follow the adventures of our main character. Her name is Temerity, along with kind of a goblin sidekick named Half Pint as they go through this dungeon. And she's trying to find her brother. She's trying to find her father. She's trying to be an adventurer. She's just, I guess, trying to make something out of herself other than what she has been doing, and that's serving in a tavern. I liked most of this book. I think if Palmer Pickering really wants to get into litrpg, then there's a few things that can be done for the forthcoming books in this series, because it does lend itself ready for book 2 for sure. There's a few mechanical things about litrpg that I think can get incorporated, such as like a character class being a little bit more specific, rather than like in this book, they called her a melee fighter, not even a fighter, just melee, and that her job was going to be attack. Somebody else's job was going to be shield. For me, it's really kind of a generic way of looking at it. And I think for new people to game literature, that's going to be an easy start and a great way to get in. For those of us who've read a lot of litrpg, it might seem like it's not quite as developed, as we would like in our genre. But again, hats off to Palmer Pickering. She's made a really fun adventure book. It reads extremely fast. I did really enjoy the dynamic between Temerity and Half Pint, even though, if we're being honest, and I try to be as much as I can here, I'm not in love with the names Temerity or Half Pint for our main characters. If you want to talk nitpicks, that's about as nitpicky as you get. It doesn't matter. I recommend the book. I wouldn't have even put it on here if I didn't recommend the book. So yeah, check out Darktown. Thank you, Palmer, for sending it to me. Now, the fourth book that I read in July was because of a community poll. And every month we do this for our subscribers. So if you've not yet subscribed to the channel, here's a great reason to do it. What happens is once a month, I throw in a bunch of books into a community poll. And the community who's subscribed to the channel essentially votes on what they would like to see me do in terms of my TBR. What do they want me to add in for my month? And for the month of July, the community picked Never Die by Rob J. Hayes. This was, again, you guys know me so well, this was exactly what the doctor ordered. It's a standalone fantasy. There are mystery elements to it. There are things where once you think you know what's going on, you realize you might not know what's going on. And for me, I love that in my fantasy fiction, because you read enough books and you start to kind of see formulas, right? And you see patterns and you start to think, okay, I know where this book is going and blah, 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 but it's still good, so I'll read it. No, I had no idea where this book was going. I was probably, like most of the readers, blown away by the time we got to the end. I really strongly recommend Never Die. It's a lot of fun. There are martial arts elements to it. There is mystical elements to it. There's the fantastical powers elements to it. Really everything bound in a pretty tight package. I'm excited to get into more Rob J. Hayes. It's the only one of his books that I've read so far, so we're for sure going to do that. Thank you guys to the BellTube community for voting that in. I'll make sure that I throw out another poll relatively quickly for, my gosh, it's already going to be the September one, because the August poll was already done, and I'll tell you in another video who won there. But yeah, subscribe to the channel if you do want a chance to vote in those free polls. The fifth book that I read this month is for the SPFBO, which is the Self-Published Fantasy Blog-Off Competition. This is a competition where 300 authors submit their books to Mark Lawrence, who runs the competition, and through a series of random drawings, or I guess maybe just one random drawing, 300 books get selected. I've been assigned 6 books to read between really May and I want to say the end of September. And the book that I read in the month of July was called The Fealty of Monsters. And I apologize in advance if I'm getting this name wrong. It's spelled L-A-D-Z. And that could be lades, that could be lads, that could be ladies. I have no idea. It's a short book. There were some things in the book that I really appreciated. There's some cool historical fantasy elements to it that I really liked. There's some cool monsters. Obviously, the name is in the title, The Fealty of Monsters. There's a couple things about it that really maybe weren't for me as a target demographic, but that's okay. So as I get through these Spiffbo books, these competition books, I'm not going to really do full-on reviews on any of them until I select which of these 6 that I've been assigned is my favorite. When I get to that one, then I'll do more of a longer kind of a review, kind of a why I am submitting this book to my team captain, Philip Chase, in the Spiffbo competition. So yeah, I read the book, The Fealty of Monsters. I will throw a graphic up here if you want to check it out. So unlike most months, I only did one book this month on audio, and that is Awaken Online Timeless. Awaken Online is the name of the series, Timeless is the name of the book, and the author is Travis Bagwell, and the narrator is David Stiefel. This is a really good book in terms of what I like in Lit RPG. It's already book 7 of the main series, and there's also been plenty of shorter books between those 7 books. So the universe has expanded to probably about 15 books already. I usually recommend Awaken Online to people who maybe don't do audio because the written word, it's a very easy Lit RPG to sight read. And I've also sort of been unfair to the narrator because in some of the other prior books, I have felt like he hasn't distinguished enough or differentiated enough between his voicings of some characters that I wasn't always sure which character he was, doing basically. So he solved that issue here in Timeless. It's a good book. Is it my favorite in the Awaken Online series? Not by a long shot. There is a new character introduced into this book that I just was not feeling, and she makes up basically half of the book. So yeah, I recommend Awaken Online for sure is Lit RPG. Timeless, I think, did what it needed to do to progress the overall story, and it is a big story. So if you like something that's got a pretty compelling overarching, theme and plot and world building and all that good stuff, Awaken Online is quite good. And so yeah, another win for Travis Bagwell with Awaken Online Timeless. Not my favorite book of the series, but certainly not the worst. Now, the 7th book that I read in July, this came as a surprise to me. This was sent to me. Actually, it wasn't sent. It was suggested to me by Evie from She Was Only Evie. And this is All the Horses of Iceland by Sarah Tolmie. This is what I would consider to be mystical realism, kind of magical realism. It takes place in the past, but it's not really historical fiction. It's kind of like historical fantasy meets realism. I don't know what it is. It's a weird way to describe it. And I guarantee you when I listen back to what I just told you guys, it's not going to make any sense to me, just like that made no sense to you. In any event, it's a short book, and it is really good at creating an atmosphere and a vibe. And if you know me at all, I'm really big into atmospheric books. I love The Book of the New Sun. Not just for the plot, not just for the main character Severian, not because of the brilliance of Gene Wolfe, but I just like kind of the dreamlike quality that the book has to it. Same goes for something like Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. Now, I understand that those are two giants to put this book, in the same category. And to be fair, it's not in the same category. This is no Book of the New Sun. This is no Piranesi. But if you want a book that's about 120 pages long, that gives you a sense of kind of the fantastical in a magical realism way without going full bore medieval fantasy wizards and witches and all of that stuff, and you just kind of want a lighter read that gives you a little bit of a dreamy quality, All the Horses of Iceland might be something for you. I did enjoy the book. It was the last book that I read in the month of July. So I have to say, all the books that I read in July scored well with me. I didn't have any clunkers in the month of July, and that is pretty awesome. That makes it a lot more fun for me to come do these videos because I'm not talking about books that I didn't like. I'm talking about how great the month was for my reading. Let's get in. Wait. I'm hearing that we have a special guest. I'm hearing that, oh God. All right, so we've got a special guest who's coming in, and you may or may not have heard of him before. I'm guessing you probably have. I guess back in the, well, I know back in the 80s, he was a pretty big deal. Yeah, you know who I'm talking about. We're talking about synth pop icon himself, direct from 1980s, direct from that decade. Ladies and gentlemen, Rick Thunder. Hey everybody, it's me, Rick Thunder, and I'm back, and that's a fact. Okay, Brian asked me to come back and find out. Hey, no, he didn't say find out. He said tell you about some of the books that I read in the month of July. Before I do that, I have to tell you something though. So there was this one time, and
4 hours later.
And then I told him, it's not a Roland, it's a Yamaha. Can you believe that? That's a fact. Okay, so we're talking about those books, right? Okay, so the first most disappointing book I read in the month of July, this one, Guy Gavriel Kay, The Lions of Al Rasan. Okay, there were no lions. That's my review. There were no lions. Disappointing view. Okay, disappointing book. Okay, so let's talk about one of the coolest books I read. Now, one of the coolest books I read this month was by a guy. He was huge like me in the 80s. He's still pretty big. But we are talking about the one and only Michael Jordan's book. They call me this too, Lord of Chaos. Lord of Chaos by Michael Jordan. It's got everything in it. It's got chaos. It's got red, uniforms, because Michael Jordan, he had red like me, Rick Thunder, and that's a fact. So anyway, I really, really like Lord of Chaos because a lot of times people tell me, Rick Thunder, we love you, but you're like the Lord of Chaos. And I said, yeah, I know I'm the Lord of Chaos, and that's a fact. Okay, so we got one more book to talk about here because I've only been paid for like 5 seconds, but I know I've gone on more than 5 seconds. My favorite book of the month, my book of July, Rick Thunder's book of July. And I'm thinking about it, and it's going to come to me. Okay, I got it. My book of the month is All the Hot Tubs of Iceland. That's right, All the Hot Tubs of Iceland. And that's a fact. Well, thank you, Rick. I don't know exactly what that was. I don't know what the whipped cream's for. I don't know really if you read any of those books. I don't even know if you read any of those books. But thanks for making the appearance. Let's talk about some videos that I made. Okay, in the month of July, BellTube put out 7 original videos. They ranged from everything to TBRs to monthly recaps to book hauls, but probably the 2 that did the best for the channel and the 2 that I really enjoyed making the most were the top 10 biggest books that I've read, just kind of counting one per series so we didn't wind up with an entire Game of Thrones or A Song of Ice and Fire rather as the entire list, or Wheel of Time. And I also did a video that is 10 great reasons why readers of fantasy would enjoy or should try litrpg, because that question comes up all the time to me. As you can imagine, I talk about litrpg so much here on the channel. We get a lot of normal fantasy readers saying, Brian, what's this litrpg? Where do I start? Does it have anything in common with fantasy? Why is it a subgenre? Is it like sci-fi? And the answers to all those questions are in a video. I'm going to put the card right here just so you can click on it. It's probably the same card I put earlier in here, but let's be honest. Who knows what we do over here on BellTube? I loved making those 2 videos. We also did 3 live streams of For Whom the Bell Tolls in the month of July. Yeah, we welcomed in 3 guests to the bell tower. The first one was Joanna from Joanna Reads. The second one was Evie from She Was Only Evie. And the third one was Matt from Matt on Books. Now, it was really fun doing the one with Matt. Well, it was fun doing all of them. But Matt, we did daytime, here in the States, because I've promised our European and Asian viewers that I would try to put out a live stream during a time that they're actually awake. So hopefully we've accomplished that. I'm going to continue to do that more often. And I really thank everybody who's not only joined us in these chats for the live streams, because chat adds so much fire and life to these interviews, but the people that watch them on replay make them worth doing because it's crazy. They get 1,000 views plus. And I wouldn't have thought in a million years that people would tune in to watch me interview other fellow booktubers, but it seems to be a pretty popular show. There's only been about 15 episodes. We've got more coming in August. I'll share with you more as we get into the month. I was also invited and appeared on 2 other channels in the month of July. The first one was with Bibliotheory, and Aaron, the host of that channel, invited me on for a book battle, and that was a blast. If you're not subscribed to Bibliotheory, I will put a link in the comments below. Sorry, I'll put a link in the description below. I don't even know what I'm doing. I also appeared on Dear Dr. Fantasy with Dr. Philip Chase. Maybe I need a Dr. Fantasy if I'm talking about linking in the comments. Anyway, I had a blast with Philip. We talked for a couple of hours. Of course, it wasn't until we turned the cameras off that, if you know Philip at all, this is so typical Philip. He says, after we're done with this thing, he goes, oh, by the way, Brian, your camera was glitching out almost the entire interview, so your face is fairly frozen for 2 hours. I'm like, okay, all right, Philip, I see what we're doing here. Anyway, you guys, if you missed that episode, it's a great one. I had such a great time with Dr. Chase. Truly one of the kindest people I have ever met in my life. That is beyond just BookTube. This is somebody who just doesn't have a mean bone in his body as far as I'm concerned. Thank you to both Aaron and Philip for inviting me on your shows this month. Okay, so we got to do a book of the month, right? Now, this is a little bit tricky because I loved all the books that I read this month, but as I sit and reflect on it, it's really obvious to me which is the book of the month. And finally, this guy has come in second place literally 3 times since I've started doing books of the month. But I have to say, congratulations, Christopher Rocchio. Disquiet Gods is the book of the month for me for July. It is a return to form, to Howling Dark, and to Demon in White. And I think we've gotten past the parts of Kingdoms of Death. Ugh, what am I even talking about? This is a Larry Correia book. You guys, wow. Anyway, it's better than Kingdoms of Death. It's better than Ashes of Man. Disquiet Gods is the book of the month. I hope if you haven't yet started your Sun Eater journey, you put it on your TBR sooner rather than later. There's no great urgency that you've got to, fly through all the books. But if you haven't yet picked up Empire of Silence, which is book 1, I don't know what you're doing. Get on the hype train with the Sun Eater. It is worth it. There is payoff. And Christopher Rocchio is a brilliant writer. I respect so many of the things that he's doing. And it is finally my pleasure to say that Christopher Rocchio on BellTube has a book of the month, and that's Disquiet Gods. And that's going to get me to the one for the road today. And we are talking about reflection and not dwelling. And this video has gone on a little bit long, and so I'm going to keep this one for the road a little bit short. I like these monthly recaps because it gives me a chance to reflect on the last 30 days. And I think in our own lives, if we took that attitude to our past a little bit, it would be better than what some of us do, and that's dwell. And I thought about this morning when I was thinking about making this video and what I wanted to share today for our one for the road. And I thought that this might be of some practical use for you. And again, sometimes we get into the more esoterical thoughts and philosophies here, in the one for the road segments. And sometimes we get into the more of the practical. And I want to try to give you something a little bit practical today. If you can, when you are thinking about stuff that happened in your past, whether it was an hour ago, a year ago, a decade ago, multiple decades ago, really whenever it was, if you could frame it mentally in a way that you are thinking about reflecting on that rather than dwelling on it, you automatically put something different into your mind filter that kind of pulls you out of your own body for a second and makes things a little bit more what they really were rather than our perceptions of what they were, if that makes some sense. So reflection is great. Dwelling kind of implies that we're going to stay there for a while. And for a lot of us, when we think about the past, unless you're somebody who's, the glory days was the high school football team and you just constantly dwell on that, living in, this illusionary past of greatness for the rest of your life, most people, when they look at their past over a prolonged period of time, I think they tend to dwell more than they tend to reflect. And that's my challenge for us here today. Let's try to make it a point to reflect more than dwell. And you know what? I'm reflecting about what we're going to talk about next month because I know what the August TBR is. I'll put a card up here for it because that video has already come out. You guys are the greatest. If you've made it this far in the video and you've not yet subscribed to the channel, it does help other people find the channel when you hit that thumbs up button. I love it when we get new subscribers. Of course, there is a Patreon as well. It's in the description, not in the comments. I got it right this time. It's in the description, and it's cheap. It's less than $2 a month. If you want to help this channel grow in, ways that are beyond viewing, which, by the way, if you're watching this at all, thank you so much. Viewing counts, right? But if you want to throw a little extra support in with Patreon, it is available to you. I had a blast this month in July, you guys, mostly because of what you guys recommended. I'm having a great time with BelTube. We're only 8 months old. We've got a lot more left. But for now, stay positive, everybody. And here's your fortune.